Hello, my name is Joanna Mora, and this is my research on recent advances in early diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. I I conducted this research with the help of my mentor, Dr. Sakti Swarup. Okay, so what is Alzheimer's? It's those diseases that you hear all the time, but you're not exactly sure what it is. So basically, it is Alzheimer's disease. I condensed it in this during this presentation in this research, I call it AD to give it short. It is a type of dementia that is a neurodegenerative disease that causes memory loss, behavioral changes, communication difficulties, and many more. Like over time, like your brain will just kind of like condense down. I'll go more into that later. So around 6.9 million Americans and thousands have it worldwide, where most of the people that are affected are over 65 years old. That's why you hear a lot of like old people or the elderly that report having Alzheimer's. Okay, so what is happening deep down inside? Inside the brain, we have many different proteins. Two of these major proteins are known as the tau proteins and beta amylase proteins. So normally, sorry, I can't see well. The beta amylase proteins control the growth of neurotides, which allow the communication of neurons. And tau proteins are the ones that provide the overall structure for neurons. Neurons are also known as brain cells, and that's basically what your brain is composed of, and that's how it sends information and communication. However, we don't know exactly why, but sometimes there are abnormal surges or like huge amounts of these proteins that are formed, causing buildups and known as tau tangles and beta amylase blockages. These blockages start like restricting and hurting the communication of the neurites and the neurons, which eventually leads to their eventual like loss and degeneration, and they just kind of start dying off. So these buildups normally start in the temporal, parietal, and frontal lobes and the hippocampus. I forgot to include that part too. But that's basically all the stuff sort of associated with your brain's memory and behavior and ability to execute executive functions. Okay, so why do we need to diagnose Alzheimer's early in the first place? So Alzheimer's is a constantly progressing disease. There is no cure for it. The people are working hard to find a cure, but so far there's nothing except some treatments. These treatments are meant to like help control and mitigate the symptoms and to let the person live a healthier, happier, easier, convenient lifestyle. However, the effectiveness of this treatment is dependent on how early you start it. So the earlier start you get in this treatment, the better you're gonna have with your journey with Alzheimer's. The later you start the treatment, the less effective it'll be. And so we need to diagnose it early so you can start your treatment early and it'll be more effective. So the research methods. This is actually a literature review where I pulled like a bunch of research essays and all of them. I condensed them. I saw them and collected them from databases as Google Scholar and the National Library of Medicine. Analyze these studies, including population studies, lab experiments, and I focus on data accuracy, sensitivity, and bias. And out of these, I also consider the accuracy, cost, bias, and limitations. Just assessing how these advancements have been doing. Okay, so let's start with our first method of early AD detection. They're known as biomarkers. These are special, like the proteins, like the tau and the beta amylase, also shown as AB there, it's a little AB. These are seen as biomarkers. So what researchers have done and what professionals do now is they take cerebral spinal fluid, which is fluid in your spine, and from that they're able to view the proteins and measure how many levels. The higher the levels of tau and AB, the more this shows how you're more progressed progressed in Alzheimer in your Alzheimer's thing. It shows that you have Alzheimer's basically, and how much of it you have. So, cerebral spinal fluid, the way they take this out is they stick a needle in your lumbar spine, and that is very painful and very expensive. A lot of people cannot do that because either it is too painful and it is too expensive and not accessible. So, to fight against this, researchers have looked into where else can we find these proteins, and they thought, let's look in the blood. And so, while we didn't find the exact ones, while they didn't find the exact proteins from the CSF fluid, they did find it in blood plasma. Yeah, they found them in blood plasma. They were able to, they named them p-tau, plasma tau, and AB42, the type of AB there, beta amylase, that's what they call it. And they showed that the same thing as the CSF, or like the higher the levels, the more in AD they had progressed. It also was a little sensitive where it showed that AD had progressed slightly. So like it shows like it just started appearing. And they also found this sort of with antibodies, but this one was, I didn't find as much research on this part. So let's discuss. Is this possible to use in clinical trials? It is so far blood-based, or it's a great idea. Really good lower risk, a lot cheaper to get. You can get it in a routine clinical exam. That would be great. However, what do you say? There's no exact single biomarker. They don't have like an assigned one because there's many different types. They found many different types of tau and ABs, and they don't know if you can combine them to create a more accurate test, or if there's other biomarkers that we could use. Also, these biomarkers require sensitive assays, but they hopefully, with more research, we can use these to like create an earlier detection of AD. Next up are genetic markers. So genetic markers are kind of similar to biomarkers. I found that a lot of the research essays, they kind of correlated. So that's why in this part, they found some stuff with like blood-based genes too. So this all started where around 20 years ago, scientists had discovered that the genes APP, prednisolone 1 and prednisolone 2 were linked to inherited forms of the disease. And this led to the entire search for genetic markers, my bad. Genetic screening are done through the use of genetic genome-wide association studies where they compare DNA from 80 patients and controls, people that don't have it, to identify which risk genes there are. And they looked into the blood-based genes and they showed moderate accuracy, but there wasn't much more research done on that, and so they shifted into looking to RNA, the exact copy of DNA. And they provided more details and insight on the expression. And so they found that they identified that genetic markers that included APOE, BIN1, and sorry, I can't see well, Pyclam, APO, I'm just saying them all. In particular, they were shown to be a strong predictor for mild cognitive impairment to AD. Mild cognitive impairment is past early levels of AD, so how effective that is for early detection is kind of not the best, but it's something, and hopefully you can do genetic screening to see if you're susceptible. Yes, and that's what I also mentioned in my discussion, where we keep finding new genes and mutations, and so hopefully they keep getting more accurate. And however, there's still like limits on, because there's so many more genes, mutations, and gene markers that are popping up that we don't know which one works the best. So just like the biomarkers, there's no exact designated gene genetic marker. and the research is still relatively new and more research should be conducted. So let's get into cognitive tools. Cognitive tools or cognitive exams are the traditional approach to detect AD, but it usually only works for like once you already show more signs of AD and you're like in the moderate level. You're not early, you're moderate. So it's not as effective. So the treatments won't be as effective. So to address this, um, researchers have looked into creating digital cognitive tools such as the MOCA-CC and the digital clock drawing test, where they are a digital approach on traditional cognitive tool tests to like more accessibly and efficiently screen people that think they might have Alzheimer's. Also, virtual reality tests, such as the virtual supermarket, allow researchers to just have a more real life kind of view and to like see how the person has their symptoms. And yeah, so to improve this, they're looking into turning traditional cognitives into digital and combining with biomarker testings too. And so far, it has shown that people that did well in the digital cognitive assessments were least likely to get Alzheimer's, but it also showed that people that didn't do well with these digital cognitive exams, they monitored it with the biomarkers, and both showed that they were progressing in AD throughout series after like 5 years. So we see that technology is transforming Alzheimer's disease detection, and through digital versions of cognitive tests like the CC, MOCACC, and VR simulations. So these tools can help people improve their accessibility. They can get it more, and it reduces cultural bias and allows for like broader and more realistic assessment of cognitive decline. Also, combining cognitive tools with biomarkers also shows promise for diagnosing the preclinical AD. However, there's still some challenges where about how older adults may have difficulty using technologies and new technologies. There's also like the concern of data privacy. So if you get diagnosed online, who will be able to access that information? So there's risks of misuse or scams. And while it's all promising, it's all in development and further testing is needed, and you have to also wait for all of this to be improved. Okay, so neuroimaging and AI. For AI, I kind of condensed it. There was also AI, machine learning, and deep learning. I just called it AI here. So traditionally, MRI and PET are neuroimaging techniques that are valuable for detecting brain changes and amyloid beta deposits. So, but this is again once everything is in a more moderate stage and it's kind of progressed, AD has progressed. So to improve this early detection, researchers have combined different imaging modalities, they call it multimodal imaging, to identify subtle signs of subjective decline and a potential precursor for AD. These combinations offer a more comprehensive view of the brain's structure, function, metabolism. And advances in AI and machine learning are also further enhancing the neuroimaging, like how you can analyze it. And so for the AI itself, convolutional neural networks have demonstrated up to 95% accuracy of detecting mild cognitive impairment, while more advanced modules like the 3D hybrid compact convolutional transformers can predict AD progression with high precision. And overall, integrating AI with multimodal imaging holds great promise for more accurate AD diagnosis. So the discussion part of neuroimaging and AI. Together, combining these technologies such as the MRI and PET help improve early detection and mild cognitive impairment. So while this helps diagnostic accuracy, it also raises the risk of human error due to the volume of data, especially for the multimodal imaging. You're getting more data, you can see more, it's leads to more risk of missing some important data in there. So to address this, AI is used to assist with image analysis and even predict early AD progression. However, again, with like similar to the cognitive tools, there is concerns about data privacy and consent in AI, the regulation of AI in healthcare, because your AI is taking in all this information and all these scans, and people are kind of iffy on if they want to share that. But despite that, AI is a powerful tool for enhancing early AD diagnosis. So, overall results. Early diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is crucial due to its symptom-free preclinical stage. And this literature review analyzed recent advancements in early AD detections. Blood-based biomarkers and autoantibodies have improved accessibility compared to traditional cerebral spinal fluid tests, though no single biomarker can reliably detect AD. Genetic screening also shows potential but faces similar limitations to those of the biomarkers. Digital and VR-based cognitive tools offer new monitoring methods, but must consider older users' compatibility. And AI also allows deep analysis, but raises privacy concerns. All of these methods give like more hope to early diagnosing AD, but they need more research and clinical approval before there's used worldwide. Okay, and well, that should conclude my presentation, and thank you to the Talaria program for granting me the opportunity to conduct this research and to just see it on a more deeper level. And thank you for my mentor for guiding me through this process and giving me advice along the way.